And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. Off. It's orange!
Orange 25! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.
Good evening. You are taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where SpaceX is now less than 1 hour away from the scheduled launch of the Starlink 12-21 mission. Take two. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be your host for this evening, and I am, of course, not alone as we watch not just one launch, but potentially 2 launches tonight with 3 rockets on the launch pads. Take a look at this. On the right side of your screen is the T-minus 20-minute vent for Falcon 9 over on the West Coast. So on the left is Space Launch Complex 40, and on the right is Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg Space Force Base. That is the SpaceX and Punch mission, which is a little under 20 minutes away now from a scheduled launch from there, liftoff. Currently targeting 11:10 p.m. Eastern, that's 8:10 p.m. local time there. We'll talk about both that mission and the Starlink tonight, but let's introduce the people that are joining me here for tonight. That includes Alex. How's it going, Alex?
I'm doing fantastic. It's always great when we have 2 launches, probably within just a few minutes of each other, less than an hour between both. That's going to be interesting if it actually happens.
Oh, let's hope so. And in the field, at least on the best coast, aka the East Coast, is Max Evans. How's it going, Max?
Good evening, everybody. It's going great here, Sawyer. Weather is in stark contrast to yesterday, and it is absolutely lovely out here tonight on the Space Coast. And it's being hopefully seeing 2 Falcon 9s launch tonight within about a half hour of each other is going to be a sight to see. And we have one more coming up tomorrow. I guess we could say the main event in Crew 10 launching tomorrow evening. So SpaceX team is running on full steam.
That is true, and not just the lock steam and venting from the right side, but yes, tomorrow is the Crew 10 launch. That rocket is also out at the launch pad at LC-39A at the Kennedy Space Center, also in Florida, ready for launch tomorrow night, 7:48 p.m. Eastern Time. Boy, there's a lot going on. See, there it is on the right side of your screen. Both of the rockets now on your screen are in Florida. Both of them will hopefully be off the ground within the next 24 hours. We will see what happens. But let's start tonight, as we first off thanking Jay Keegan for being able to do all these quick switches and bring us multiple launch views tonight. Let's talk about the Starlink first, Alex, and then we'll go over to SpaceX. What is the number of Starlink satellites we're expecting tonight? How many are direct to cell, and which way is it going?
Yeah, so today's launch from Florida is carrying 21 Starlink satellites. 8 of them are V2 mini satellites, and the other 13 are direct-to-cell satellites, those satellites that communicate directly to phones on the ground. So this mission is part of the Group 12 missions, right? For those that may be wondering what 12-21 means, that's essentially Group 12. That's the sort of, class of missions, right? It's a class of missions. Group 12, and then 21 is just the number of the mission. It's the 21st mission number. It is not the 21st launch. It's actually the 16th launch because they've been, jumping between certain numbers. They've not launched certain missions in between 1 and 21, essentially. So Group 12 missions are these missions where they launch this mix of V2 Mini and Starlink direct-to-cell satellites into a 43-degree inclination orbit and into a low Earth orbit. So today's mission will go to a 284 by 294 kilometer orbit in altitude. From there, the satellites will separate and then they'll raise their orbits to whatever altitude SpaceX may want. They have an option to raise some of them up to 380 kilometers, and others may go up to 530 kilometers, depending again on what SpaceX wants to use those satellites for. Another thing as well is, of course, they're going to get there thanks to that second stage, but also that first stage is very flight proven. It's flying for a 22nd time on today's mission. It's going to be landing downrange on the drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas. That's booster Beaton 69 there that you see on your screen. Very sooty, and quite a rarity that we have the other two launches happening within 24 hours. They are far newer boosters. The one from Vandenberg is launching for a third time, while the one at 39A with Crew 10 is launching for a second time. So this is the norm. Seeing a very sooty booster, that's the norm. The other two launches are the rare ones.
Ironically, yes. The booster on the right, you can see it's still relatively toasty. That is the one out at Vandenberg launching tonight. That one is on its third flight, as you mentioned, launching NRL 126 and Transporter 12. Max, what booster are we looking at for tonight's launch here?
So stationed over on the docket at Slick 40 is B1069. We all know it. We all love it. It had a rough start to its life, but here we are 21 flights later, and it is hopefully about to begin its 22nd here in about 52 minutes and change. It began out in life with CRS-24, Eutelsat Hotbird 13F, OneWeb 1, SES 18 and 19, and then 17 previous Starlink missions. So it's had quite the full life to this point, and hopefully a lot more to come with it. Worth noting that after its first flight with CRS-24, that was a drone ship landing, and I guess the drone ship and the booster caught a swell at the wrong time, and the booster came in for a rather strong and I guess harsh landing on the drone ship, and crushed a few of the crush cores on the landing legs, and then crunching a few of the engine bells of the 9 Merlin 1D engines. Had to be chained down to the deck, and there was enough damage to where everyone who was looking at it was I guess thinking that they'd have to scrap the booster and that the damage was too excessive. Maybe the damage to the thrust puck was not worth digging into, but obviously SpaceX thought otherwise, and here we are 21 flights later, and it has had a full life. As Alex said earlier, it is going to be heading downrange southeast tonight on a 43-degree orbital inclination, and hopefully around 8 minutes into flight, the first stage booster 1069 will meet the drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas, for landing and eventual recovery here at the Cape. And the vessel helping out in fairing recovery a bit farther downrange is Doug. So SpaceX looking to get back into normal Starlink operations, but there is not much you can say that's normal about tonight and tomorrow, with 3 launches happening within 24 hours from all 3 Falcon launch pads.
Yeah, I mean, that is the SpaceX cadence. We're talking 170 to 180 launches planned for 2025. It's not surprising to see this cadence, but it is surprising to see that not all of them are Starlinks. We just have a singular Starlink and 2 NASA missions. I just think that's really cool. So we are now 50 minutes away here. Reminder, if you have questions, you can tag us at NASASpaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as we can. And a reminder, I saw people asking about it. The clock that you see on the top left is not the one for the West Coast launch, the SphereX one. That one is about 13 minutes until launch. The one you see there is for the rocket on your screen, which is the Starlink 12-21 mission, of which we are on site for. So that is why the clocks might seem different depending on which mission you're watching here. Ricky Nixon is wondering, Alex, were both scrubs yesterday, both of SphereX and of 12-21, due to weather?
The Starlink scrub was definitely for weather. In the case of SphereX, it was also because of a spacecraft issue. They have solved that. And fortunately, at least from Vandenberg, the weather is 90% go. So it's the complete opposite of yesterday. Yesterday was 90% no go. So essentially only 10% go. And today there at Vandenberg is again 90% go. Really good weather conditions. Seems like they're not tracking any issues so far. So hopefully they get that off the ground. And of course, we see that as well here in 49.5 minutes with Starlink from Florida.
That is what we are hoping for. That is for sure. And again, Booster 1069 continuing to rack up the flights. 22 hopefully successful flights here. Unbelievable. And I guess the other real question weather-wise, two of them. One, is it cloudy at Vandenberg? Because it's Vandenberg. Some
It's
fog.
clear. Look at that.
At least you could see the rocket exists. That's a good improvement.
Yeah, just a few minutes ago, there was actually a gorgeous sunset over the ocean over there in the background from Slick 4. So they actually said on the webcast toward the beginning that the weather forecast was, I think, greater than 90% favorable for liftoff tonight. So again, in stark contrast to yesterday, where it was 90% unfavorable due to clouds and other factors at play. But also they had that one data issue on the SphereX and Punch payloads. And yeah, yesterday it was windy as can be. For those of you who were with us during the count, you may have seen the camera here almost tipped over a couple of times because it was gusting anywhere from 30 to 50 knots at times, and that was, I guess, uncomfortable for us there on the ground. I can only imagine how Falcon. But again, weather is looking great here, at least on the Space Coast. I mean, it is at Vandenberg as well, but it is Vandenberg. The Space Coast here is looking lovely. There is not a breath of wind around us. The air is stagnant. It is calm. It is quiet. We have a waxing moon overhead, and you honestly, for a night launch, you really cannot ask for any better weather than this. It is absolutely beautiful out. So hopefully we can get Falcon 9 off the ground tonight, both from Slick 40 and Slick 4E.
Oh,
Here we go. And we are now T plus 1,448 hours away from the launch of Spirit.
this is what happens when you watch live.
We joke, of course, we are now about 10 minutes away from that launch. So while we have a moment, then let's talk about the other mission on the right side of your screen. Of course, the launch from Florida, the one you see on the left side, still counting down, about 47 minutes to go. SphereX now approaching the 9-minute mark. Alex, can you talk to us a little bit about the spectrophotometer for the history of the universe, epoch of reionization, and ice explorer, as well as polarimeter to unify the corona and heliosphere? That is the full name of SphereX and Punch, by the way.
Yeah, those two. In fact, I was going to say those two are NASA missions that are ride-sharing into a sun-synchronous orbit from Vandenberg. Those are out there on the West Coast. That launch will head southwest, while the one in Florida is going southeast. The one in California will go southwest, the other way around. And one of the things that they're launching, so the first sort of the main payload right on top is that Phoenix spacecraft. That is an infrared telescope, essentially, by all means. It's an observer, and it's going to be working on sort of trying to trace the very first instance right after the Big Bang, essentially looking at all of that part of the far range out there in the solar system, trying to track millions of galaxies and trying to understand how they came to be. Using that data plus the one from James Webb Space Telescope, they're going to be able to map, that evolution of the formation of galaxies and trace that back to the very first moments of the history of the universe, which I think it's really interesting. And that's why, SphereX, it says spectrophotometer for the history of the universe. Epoch of reionization and ISIS Explorer. Like it's a mouthful, but it's a all-in-one kind of observatory. Then you have Punch, which is actually observing the sun, and that's why it's launching into a sun-synchronous orbit. And one of the things that it's going to do is there are 4 payloads, and they're going to be observing the sun and how it interacts with things like the corona of the sun, right? Like the photosphere with the corona, the solar wind, how that all sort of, evolves as it spins out from the sun out to, the solar system and beyond. That is a very important thing to also understand because on the other hand, you see there that Starlink launch. Oh, thank you.
What you're hearing, by the way, are the callouts for the SphereX and Punch mission. These are not the callouts for Starlink,
exactly.
Which, again, is on the left side of your screen. This is the callouts for the SphereX mission on the right side of your screen, which Alex is discussing.
And I was actually going to tie in with the Starlink launch from Florida because sometimes when the sun decides to be a bit, angry at the Earth, sometimes the Starlink satellites do suffer because of that, right? And we've seen that in previous missions where some coronal mass ejection, for example, might alter the higher parts of the atmosphere and things like that. So being able to understand
Stage
all
1
of that is
RP1
part
load
of
is
the.
complete.
Well, thank you. And so that is part of the Punch mission, being able to understand that evolution, from the sun out to the corona and solar wind, how that transition goes and everything. It's a very important mission, of course, and those two are launching on NASA. Those two NASA missions are launching on a single Falcon 9 rocket, which is a first for NASA as well. It's a rideshare on Falcon 9, I guess, but yeah.
And really quickly before we move on, I think it's worth mentioning that Punch is being managed by NASA's Goddard Center, and then SphereX is being managed by the one and only JPL.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. As if we're not confusing with enough locations, a reminder that the one on the right is, or the one on the left now, excuse me, they swapped. The one on the left now is Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. The one on the right is Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. And we need to reach out to NASA and ask if maybe they can simplify their acronyms, because I appreciate the creativity with the acronyms that they have, but this one's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
You can never have too many acronyms, Sawyer. Come on.
Oh, I agree, but they shouldn't take 20...
Falcon 9
they shouldn't
tanks are
take
pressurizing for Stromback retract.
They shouldn't take an epoch to be able to say epoch in it. There. It took me a second. I was coming up with one, but we got there. So as you mentioned, they're going to be starting to retract the Strongback, which Matrix actually is a good question, Alex. Why does the transporter erector not lay all the way down at launch, since it needs to go horizontal eventually anyway? And I know the one out in California is a little different from the ones we're used to here in
Strongback
Florida.
retract has started.
Yeah, here in California, you'll see that it's going to open the top clamps and it'll retract and it will not do any other movement afterward. It'll stay at sort of 77-degree inclination out from the rocket. And so the whole deal with the Stromback is that once it throws back, at least in the East Coast, it separates from the reaction
NLM, this is LD
fixture
on
there.
Countdown Net. This is NLM. The NLM providing the status that the Falcon 9 is healthy and we're tracking no issues heading into launch. Can you provide a final verification status for your team? NASA's go for launch. Great, thank you.
Nice.
Good news.
That is great news. So, as I was saying, you see where the Falcon 9 is standing there. Those are the clamps there and everything. That place where that is, the transport erector comes in two sections, a Stromback and that bottom. And so when it does the throwback maneuver, it sort of declamps from that reaction fixture. And so it needs to go back up again to clamp to it again and be able to do all of the pushbacks and everything before fully securing the pad and everything. And then it goes horizontal, and we've seen that with all of the KSC flyovers that we've done with Max, D, Julia, and everyone out there at the Space Coast. But yeah, that's mainly the reason why.
Yeah,
Stage
and
1
the
lock
one
load is
out
complete.
the one out in
There we
Vandenberg
go.
is much older than the ones on the Space
Mhm.
Coast, so it doesn't have that new fancy lean back, but yeah. Or the fancy throwback beyond the lean back, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it'll stay like that through launch, unlike the one
Exactly.
on the Space Coast. 2.5 minutes to go.
Yes,
Should we
and
wrapping
again,
up? Oh, go
I was,
ahead.
just, I was going to say that, again, this follows a very similar countdown to the one that we're
Mhm.
about to see with Starlink on the right, in the fueling wrapping up shortly, as you heard there. I believe we're almost fully fueled on the Sphere X punch launch.
Yep. You may also notice that we don't have the same overlays that you see, for example, on the other official streams. That's because this is a clean feed from NASA, so thank you for that. But that's the whole reason why.
Now, 2 minutes away from Sphere X, and at this point, we should also be getting the polling underway at Cape Canaveral for the launch of Starlink 12-21. We will not hear that audio feed, as they do not make that public, unlike the feed that you have
Stage
here.
2 lock load is complete.
Nice.
And that means that Falcon 9 is fully fueled, and we should see the reappearance of the T-minus 20-minute vent. There you go, except this time, instead of purging the line to begin fueling the next propellant,
Ground
it
gas
is
closeouts.
just venting it all out with the ground gas closeouts, as you heard there.
Oh, there you can see the gas closeouts on the reaction fixture too. That
At
venting.
the bottom. Yeah.
Yep. You cannot see that at the Space Coast.
Well, based off of the cameras we're given, yeah. Maybe tomorrow for Crew 8. We'll see. Or Crew 10. Crew 10. Crew 8.
Crew
That was
8.
a huge-
Sawyer, where are you?
Apparently
Falcon
a
9
year
is in
ago.
startup.
There we go.
1 minute to go. Tanks are also pressurizing the flight levels.
Should hear an official go for launch in about 5 seconds or so.
LE is go for launch.
Bingo.
Right in the center. That's what we want to hear. We are now 30 seconds away.
And reminder, this is going back to
T-minus 30
the
seconds.
landing zone.
Yes, unlike Falcon
California.
9. Right, unlike for Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which is doing a drone ship landing, this is returned to launch site. It will land back at LZ4. Let's listen in to the
T-minus
SpaceX
15
audio here for the last 15 seconds.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9. No SpaceX, go clear, go
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Vehicle is supersonic.
That's a pretty good sound for the West Coast tonight.
Absolutely.
Max Q.
Aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, max Q. Reminder, you are watching the launch of the SpaceX and Punch
And back chill.
from Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg Space Force Base. The countdown continues to tonight's Starlink 12-21 launch from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in about 36 minutes. You're getting a 2-for-1 tonight here at NSF. And a reminder that this mission, as we just discussed, this booster will be coming back to land back at the launch site.
Wonder if we might get a bit of a jellyfish here with the launch being so close to sunset or so.
It's possible. 2
We
minutes
will-
into flight?
We'll wait and find out, won't we?
Exactly. 3 minutes from the main engine cutoff, stage separation, and second engine start back to back to back. You can see the...
Main engine cut
There
out.
we go. There's Nico.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition.
That's the second
Stage
stage
1
ignition.
back
MVAC.
startup.
There goes the flip. Look at that.
Yes, the
Also
first
full
stage
nozzle.
turning back around. Yes, a non-stubby nozzle.
Thanks, Alex.
Look at the plume effect, though, coming off of that second stage nozzle. And the boost back. Wow.
That must look crazy from the ground. Wow, look at that.
That is the boost back burn where it's slowing itself down and turning itself around to go back to land there. A little bit of what we call the Falcon Nebula.
Bearing separation confirmed.
And there it is on a slight delay.
There go the fairings. Those are new fairings, debuting for the first time and they're going to be recovered by ferry recovery vessel Go Beyond on the west coast.
And beautiful views here from the second stage as well. We call it the Falcon Nebula
Stage
as the
1, boost
plumes
back,
interact
shutdown.
with the view from the sun on its way down. It's similar to a jellyfish effect, but extra from those engines burning.
Yep, we're going to get the same thing tomorrow with Crew 10, hopefully.
Hopefully, yes. Crew 10 will be happening at 7:48 p.m. local time. You see the cold gas jet thrusters firing on the left. And the grid fins deploying, which will help steer once it gets into the thicker parts of the atmosphere. Trying to find different ways to word it, so when we get to T0 for Starlink, I'm not repeating the same thing word for word. See what other verbose terminology we can use to describe the events of Falcon 9 happening 33 minutes apart from each other here.
And remember, things are still counting down from the East Coast. We're still 33 and a half minutes away from that Starlink launch in Florida, while Falcon 9 continues into orbit from California. There you can see that side by side.
Max, are we starting to see any frost yet?
I am keeping my eyes peeled. The go for prop load should have taken place about 3 or 4 minutes ago, and prop load itself should have begun about 2 minutes ago. So we are keeping an eye out on the bottom of the LOX tank. That will be our first visual indicator here from the KSC press site as to whether they are in prop load or not. Actually, you know what? Can I see a little bit of a frost ring on the bottom there of the LOX tank? Jay, enhance.
Jake,
it gets a lot more. Yep, it gets a lot more visible once they load a lot more liquid oxygen. So we're gonna see more frost. If they're indeed tracking that T0, then we're gonna get a lot more frost soon, and it'll be very definitive.
And actually, the T0 for SphereX and Punch lined up exactly when the SpaceX launch director here at the Cape would have verified if they are go for prop load or not. So timelines are I guess flowing right together with all SpaceX teams tonight.
Exactly. Again, 32 minutes from that. It does appear that there's a little frost forming. We'll take a closer look after the SphereX launch for sure. Right now, that is the one on the left side of your screen is the one launching out of Vandenberg. The one on your right is the one out of Cape Canaveral, Florida. And we should be coming up on that first stage entry burn shortly for the SphereX launch. Meantime, we're looking at the second stage and back. And there's the confirmation.
There it is.
And now this is about a little under 20-second burn here.
Stage 1, entry burn, shutdown.
Coming in hot to California.
Yes, if you're anywhere in California, you may hear sonic booms. So fair warning.
You can see the lights of the coast.
And also some plasma on the grid fins there. Look at that!
Absolutely stunning. At this point now, we should be under a minute away from the start of the landing burn. About 30 seconds away from the landing burn, under a minute away from the actual landing back at the launch site.
Stage 1 FTS
California,
saved.
Get ready for sonic booms.
Stage 1, transonic.
Dark, but only for a few seconds. You should see that light from the landing burn.
I should point out the sonic booms are in the area around
Stage 1,
Vandenberg.
landing burn.
There it is.
Let's see if we get the landing audio from the landing zone.
There's the landing zone.
Stage 1, landing like
look
deployed.
at that.
Stage 1,
I don't know
landing
whose
confirmed.
whoa that was, but that is a successful landing of the first stage of Falcon 9. That was a good one. This booster now marking its third successful launch and landing. Meanwhile, the second
Stage
stage
2
engine
FPS
continues,
is saved.
and that should be cutting off shortly.
MVAC shutdown.
And while it's a little tough to see from the visuals, that engine has shut down. That is what we want to see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it seemed like they had a bit of a loss of signal there, but yeah.
Totally normal. Totally fine.
Yeah, guys, I think I definitely see a frost on the bottom of the first stage's lock tank, so we should be in prop load.
There we go. So we had the successful launch over there. There is still a second burn for that mission. That one will happen at T plus 39.5 minutes. And that is about a 40-second burn. And then it will deploy about 2 minutes after that for Sphere
Which
X.
is interesting.
Why is that interesting?
Because that second burn will be when this thing is launching.
What are the odds?
We will have 10 Merlin engines firing at the same time.
Yeah, right? That's gonna be awesome.
Which usually would not be a good thing.
Yeah. 9 Merlin 1Ds and a single Merlin vacuum engine. That's impressive. It's also impressive is the support that we've been getting here, including since the attempt yesterday. Ryan, thank you for becoming a Pad Rat member. Martin, thank you for starting off as a Pad Rat and upgrading to a Red Team member. Apocalypse Cow, Danger Moo, gifting 5 Red Team memberships, and then also super chatting 2025. I like the number for the year. A little help for the twofer tonight. Great job, folks. Thank you. Turtle Sanctuary, so long, Spearex, and thanks for all the fish. And then Bideford, love seeing your name here also, gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you. Now, John is wondering here, how often do they do drone landings on the West Coast versus RTLS?
On the West Coast?
Yeah. Because it seems like the East Coast, they're pretty much all RTLS except for maybe some crew missions.
Well, on the West Coast, they do it a little bit more often because sometimes their missions are lower in mass because they go, to polar orbits like low Earth orbits and things like that. But they also launch a lot of Starlink missions, so they do land on the drone ship out there on the West Coast on Of Course I Still Love You.
Exactly. Although it tends to be a lot less during the winter given the waves out in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Continuing to take your questions at NASASpaceflight. Quentin is wondering, Max, where exactly are you in terms of viewing location?
So tonight we are over at the press site over at the Kennedy Space Center, which is located just north of the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And from the edge of the press site lawn here, we have a view about 4.5 miles away to Space Launch Complex 40 and about maybe 3.9 or 4 miles to Slick 41, and then, of course, to LC 39A, it's about 3.5. So it's a front row seat to all 3 pads, but to Slick 40 tonight, it's about 4.5 miles and change, but we are about as close as you can get for a Starlink launch.
There you go. Not always open to the public, though. That is the important thing. For public viewing,
correct.
if you were to come here and want to see one yourself, we have a video that you can watch right here on the NSF channel of how to view a rocket launch, and it gives you all the best locations for the launch, of which we can now say that there will be 2 launches from the Cape tomorrow, and none tonight.
Oh no!
The SpaceX website has just updated to show a new T0 for this mission for 10:20 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, about 3 hours or 2.5 hours after the launch of Crew 10.
I can imagine why.
Why, Alex?
Well, we talked about this yesterday, right? Where we sort of put the situation that we are living in right now, where it was like, well, if Starlink delays to tomorrow, aka today, then they are in a situation where this launch is within 24 hours of Crew 10, and NASA likes to take a bit of time, that those 24 hours, to review the data from this launch and make sure that everything is all good to go for that launch of Crew 10. So I think we are in that situation where they said, okay, SpaceX launched. Let's just delay Starlink to tomorrow after Crew 10. Let's not put any more data than needed for that Crew 10 launch. Let's just focus. There are people riding on that rocket, right? Let's just focus on that. And once that's off the ground, then let's launch Starlink. That seems to be what may be happening here, because so far, the weather today looks a lot better, right, Max? And so it will seem that we are not in the same situation than yesterday, where they had to scrub because of liftoff winds. It will seem to me that they're probably scrubbing because of that instead.
And it is worth noting that we at NSF reached out to the Commercial Crew Program to ask about that rule specifically, which they have discussed in press conferences before, to see if that would apply to the Starlink launch tonight. We did not hear back by the time of broadcast. So I just want to note that we have reached out for an explanation on that, but did not receive one. Well, I guess that means the people that are going to be there for Crew 10, Max, we get a doubleheader tomorrow. Are you excited?
I sure hope we do. I mean, it's always it's always fun having one of those, especially when the launches are going to be within probably 4 to 5 hours of each other. Hopefully, if all goes well. But of course, the main event tomorrow is Crew 10, so all focus is currently poised for that, and Starlink afterwards would just be a bonus for us and everyone who comes back to watch. But yeah, doubleheaders. I remember even just 2 or 3 years ago, a doubleheader seemed borderline impossible, and it seemed like just a massive achievement. And now we look at it and we're like, well, that's just SpaceX doing their thing. Like, that's just become business as usual for them, because they now have the ability to launch more than one Falcon 9 from each pad, with on the same day within hours of each other, and that is a huge advantage for the company as a whole.
By the way, for reference, the last time that SpaceX has done a double header from the Cape, 2 weeks ago exactly tomorrow. That was IM-2 and another Starlink mission, where you may recall it was a Starlink launch that delayed twice beforehand and then happened to move to the same day as a mission off of 39A. Well, this is now scrubbed twice and is scheduled to launch from Pad 40 after the Crew 10 launch from 39A. This feels familiar.
Deja vu.
I like this timeline. Well, unfortunately, no launch tonight, but Max, thank you for rolling out to provide the views here.
It is a pleasure, as always, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to hang out. And you know what? Scrubs are just part of the game, folks. That is just the nature of the game we play, and we will come back and try again tomorrow, hopefully after a successful launch of 4 astronauts aboard Crew 10.
That is what we're hoping for. Of course, the crew flight of the utmost importance, and we hope for the success of that mission first, followed, hopefully, by the Starlink. Alex, thank you for joining as well.
It's always a pleasure, and hopefully we get, another crew up into space tomorrow again. I do agree with, the whole thing of being focused on the important missions, right? Starlink can wait another day, and crew rotations and humans on board, it's always really important for the program.
Yes, a reminder that is scheduled to launch tomorrow night at 7:48 p.m. Eastern Time. Our live coverage begins 4 hours before launch. You may say, why so early? Well, because we like to cover the crew getting suited up and rolling out to the launch site. And of course, we want to be there for the entire time that there is crew on their way and into the rocket tomorrow. So hopefully you'll join us for our 4-hour marathon coverage of Crew 10's launch to the International Space Station. We will be here. We will be at the press site. We'll be taking all of your questions as we normally do. And also, as we take a look in, SpaceX, continuing, by the way, this is a look inside the control center there. So just a very cool shot to see. Thank you to Jay Keegan for masterfully meandering the double header here with 2 views from 2 coasts. It is much appreciated. I also want to really quickly thank here Gypsy Tinker for becoming a PadRat member. And that diabetic kid asking, is the press site ever open to the public? Unfortunately, the answer is no. However, if you do take the KSC bus tours, there are ones that will stop off at the Vehicle Assembly Building. And directly across from the VAB is the Launch Complex 39 press site. So you can take a look at it while you're on the tour for the VAB. And eventually, I believe, the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex for a cost we'll be offering views from the Launch Complex 39 gantry, which is similar in views. Anyway, we'll be live tomorrow. I'm Sawyer Rosenstein. I've been your host for tonight's doubleheader attempt, at least. We will see you all tomorrow. Reminder, the stream is already live for Crew 10. Go hit that notification bell so you know when we go live, and check out all of the NSF socials so that you keep up to date on the latest and to see when SphereX deploys. I'm sure we will post something about that on the NSF socials, Facebook, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, all there. We will see you tomorrow.
And here we go.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Rolling up. Roger, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. It's orange! 145!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?